Hey everyone, welcome back to Conversations with Nick and Alina, and today, part 2, Conversations with Edmund.
Last week, we talked about weird experiences at Mass. We talked about
adoration.
episode 0 or episode 1 of Nick and Alina's Conversations.
That's right. We also gave our origin story for our relationship.
Yep, that was great.
So we had taken questions on Instagram, and a lot of our meat and potatoes was made up of this question of, did we have any crazy experiences during Mass or adoration?
From the Queen of what?
Yeah, Queen of Candace asked us
And we had
that question.
so much good conversation, we decided we're just going to do multiple episodes.
We did, yeah, because we have a lot of good questions here. So
got a lot to cover.
If you want to hear our crazy stories from adoration or Mass, then check out last week's episode.
It's great to be back. I'm glad that you guys brought me back this following week. Glad we're back here 7 days later. Just really...
Our washer broke, so I had to wear the same clothes.
Dang, that's rough. Me too.
I just like this outfit. So
Yeah. So
anyways,
take it away, Nick. You're the host of the show.
Let's catch up for the week. What's happened since the last episode?
I haven't eaten. That's about it.
All right. Awesome. So let's go to another question from our guest.
Let's do it.
And this is actually really appropriate because when this episode comes out, it will be during Lent. Okay, so a very Lenten question here.
Will it?
Yes. If y'all were in spiritual desolation or experiencing spiritual dryness, what would you do? This is a question from Lauren Royal. Lauren Royal, thank you.
Epic question.
It's a phenomenal question.
That's a really good question.
What is desolation?
Ooh, let's talk about that. So, Alina, do you want to speak to that, and then I'll give my thoughts?
I want to.
I love how you went, Alina, do you want to do your best effort, and then I will correct you?
That's not what I meant.
Wow.
Alina, how about you talk about that a little bit, and then I'll give you my actual
I'm going to
thoughts.
school you both in this.
Do
All
it.
right, let's hear
Do
it.
it. Let's hear it.
Because some people actually have experienced
Whoa.
it.
Wow. Sorry, Edmund and I are so holy.
What? You know, Mother Teresa was
Yeah,
in
I
a state
know.
of spiritual desolation for most of her. Or not desolation, maybe more dryness,
Yeah.
I think. But
She might have categorized it as desolation.
Really?
I mean, it was pretty dark.
Yeah, but she just kind of pushed through it. She just kept doing stuff for the Lord.
40 years.
So,
I want a t-shirt, doing stuff for the Lord.
doing stuff for the
40
Lord.
years.
No, I just want doing stuff for the Lord.
Okay.
That's
we
me.
can
Yeah.
check
That's
that
my
out in
vibe.
the merch store, guys.
That's my aesthetic.
I don't know.
All right.
I'm not a theologian about this stuff.
No,
I'm
just
more
do your
like
best.
This is about experience, though.
Lifestyle.
Like,
People
version
aren't.
of
Do you think
this.
people are coming to this podcast to get theologians?
Okay, I'm
No.
not a theologian. Don't
They can go
sue
listen
me.
to the other podcast,
the other one.
theologians.com or whatever.
Theologians are us.
Yeah.
So what can you do? Or am I answering that, or am I answering
What is
it?
spiritual
Well,
So
let's start with what is it?
How about you do that, and I'll give ideas about what to do about it.
How about you give your best effort and then she'll correct you?
All right.
Great job so far.
In
Wrong.
my assessment of what this is, it's a matter of someone that is a faithful, someone that is a Christian, and is in the midst of a time period that they are not experientially or sensationally experiencing or feeling God's presence in their life. That they're not necessarily feeling the ripples of His grace for one reason or another. Whether that's, because a lot of times in prayer, we can feel what's called consolation in prayer. And I think that desolation is the absence of that consolation in prayer, where when we're in prayer, it's like, is there anyone on the other side of the phone here? Is there anyone even listening to these prayers?
Yeah.
To me, that's how I would define desolation. Edmund, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of this comes from St. Ignatius of Loyola's
Who is his firstborn son's name?
Yeah.
Right.
and his like rules for discernment, and he talks about a little bit about this. I'm sure he has some type of definition that we could look up, but yeah.
And John at the Cross with the Dark Night of the Soul.
Yeah, and so although it's funny, my one of my professors at college, sister, Johanna,
Wait,
said,
the sister of your professor, or your professor was a sister?
my professor was a sister.
Okay.
And she was like, I remember one time during class, she was like, look, guys, none of you have the dark night of the soul. None of you are near holy enough for that. Because I think sometimes, like, in our excitement or, like, you know, we're reading these things and then you kind of start self-diagnosing a little bit.
right.
And it's like, oh, I must be going through the dark night. But
Yeah.
I think desolation is like what you're saying. The absence of any type of consolation in prayer, or the absence of any type of like difficulty and like a particular sense of being separated in some way from God. Like you're just going to prayer and it's
And
not.
not by the cause of sin.
Right. I was
Yes,
about to
and
say
not-
that.
yeah,
It's
not by
totally
sin.
different. It's distinct from separation from God through mortal sin.
Yeah.
It's more in the midst of being in a state of grace
Yeah.
to feel disconnected from God.
Yeah. And Saint Ignatius talks a lot about how God uses desolation to grow us and teach us, and that it's a natural rhythm of the interior life and the interior prayer life, that we go through seasons of consolation and desolation. And so the rules of discernment is him giving rules on what to do in consolation, what to do in desolation, which I think are really helpful.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. So, Alina, now that
What
we've
was the
kind of,
original question again?
well, the original question is, yeah, what do you do if you're in a state of spiritual desolation or experiencing spiritual dryness?
Yeah.
So, do you want to, now that we've kind of set the stage for what that even looks like, you want to touch on what do you do?
So,
Or maybe your experiences with it?
sure. My experience is basically, so I had immense consolation leading up to my conversion. Like God was just really speaking to me and really active in my prayer life. And then as soon as I converted, it was like he was gone. It was really weird. Not like gone, like I did something wrong, but like a new tier had been reached. Like you were saying, he does this to teach us things. And I had depended so greatly, and I still do, on the emotional aspects of my relationship with God, that I think he's withdrawn a little bit to teach me to not rely on that as much, which is painful, really painful. And I'm still kind of in that dryness, especially like, I don't know where I'm going with that.
Well, what stands out to me from here, even hearing you describe that in your own experience, is our relationship with God is that it's a relationship with a personal God. And I think that if we look at relationships with other persons, if we base those relationships too heavily, or the health of those relationships too heavily on the superficial, are we having fun? Are we?
Is it easy?
Is it easy?
Does it give me a positive
Like
result?
as soon as that relationship gets challenged by something, forget it. It's not going to survive. And in a similar way, like God does not want our relationship with Him to be sustained through the superficial. He allows the superficial to be kind of a catalyst, in my opinion, for our relationships with Him, or potentially even throughout our relationship with Him, to serve as catalysts for increased depth potentially. But He doesn't want the entire relationship to be founded on superficial experiences, but rather, like any relationship, whether it's a fraternal friendship or a marriage, it has to be based on something much deeper. It's a commitment to be there and stick with it through the thick and thin, even when it's not pretty, even when it's not easy. And I think that I love what you said, that He is trying to push you to not base your relationship with Him on the superficial experiential stuff, because He wants you to go deeper.
And it's so hard because I had such a deep emotional relationship growing up with Him that now it's like I'm lost half the time. Like, okay, I got to find my bearings in this relationship, because how do I judge, like, if I'm doing the right thing? Because I would judge if I was doing the right thing based on how I felt with God. And now, while my logic is telling me, Alina, you're doing the right thing, my heart is like screaming, but you're not feeling anything. So you just have to kind of ignore that and push past it. That's what I'm realizing I'm having to do, is just ignore it, push past it. occasionally, like when you're really struggling, he'll give you that nugget that just like keeps you going. He'll give you that awesome prayer experience or that awesome worship song that just like, boom, okay, we're good, God, we're good. And then it's like, okay, calm back down. So.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I think you're a big Frank Sheed fan, right?
Yeah, big
I
time.
think he talks about like the condescension of God. Like God has to be condescending.
It's so true.
Yeah, God has to be condescending. And so,
I mean, let's just pause right there.
Yeah.
He is the divine, definitive, infinite being.
yeah.
And we have the gumption to think that we can interact with him at will and that he can be our vending machine.
Yeah, I think a lot of times without knowing it, people go to prayer thinking, well, God is just a bigger, better version of me.
No.
And yeah, it's so infinitely different that we often forget that. Like I remember, well, anyways, and I think Frank Sheed talks about imagine a parent talking to a 2-year-old, and that separation between the 2-year-old and the parent, and then imagine a 2-year-old and like a professor, a PhD, and like the way that a PhD professor would talk to a 2-year-old about a certain subject, and then the gap that you'd try to fill, and then imagine like the difference between like a PhD professor and like a bug, like in the gap. And he talks about how infinitely bigger the gap between humans and God is, and the point of prayer is us slowly being conformed to the image of Christ, because that's our highest calling. Is like Jesus shows us our highest calling, but the gap between what we are and what God is so huge. And so God, I don't know if you've ever done this with your kids, but sometimes me and my wife, not often, but sometimes we are tempted to yell at our kids.
I've never done that.
Never done that, yeah.
What's that like?
Can't relate. It's difficult. It's dark. It's a dark night.
Of the soul?
Yeah, no, it's a dark night of our home. But sometimes the yelling becomes the new normal. And what's really interesting is when you get quieter, and if you start whispering at your kids, and it forces them to like,
we gotta try that.
Like they start calming down a little bit, and they're like, what? And you just keep like getting quieter. Like,
reminds me of that girl in what's the name of the movie with the acapella singing?
I can't remember her name.
Oh
Rent?
my gosh. No, that's not acapella. That's
Pitch
torture.
Perfect or something. Pitch Perfect.
Pitch Perfect.
And the little Asian
have you seen Pitch
chick
Perfect?
that's like,
oh my gosh, there's this Asian woman that's in this acapella group, and her character is like, because anytime she talks, she's like whispering in this voice that you literally can't hear, and so it's like really freaky. Anyway, totally derailing the topic here, but you should watch it. It's really good.
The point is like sometimes God has to, in the beginning, he has to speak very loudly to get your attention.
Yeah.
But he doesn't want to stay there. He wants to pull you closer to him.
that's beautiful.
Right? And so he starts quieting down. He starts getting quieter and quieter, and you have to like lean.
I feel a song.
What?
I feel a song coming out of that.
Closer and quieter.
Did you memorize the dance routine?
Pull me a little closer.
Oh.
Somebody already wrote it.
I thought we were going to go Broadway where we magically know the dance moves.
We could do that. So,
Hey.
But with desolation, and I think St. Ignatius talks about that, like that God is trying to teach us to hear him. He's trying to teach us obedience. He's trying to teach us to change. Like we need to change, and changing is not easy, and it doesn't feel good.
No.
Yeah.
Well, you have to acknowledge that you need change. I mean, that's one of the hardest things we have right now in our society is because like the programming is you are okay, and not only are you okay, but you are right. Right where you are, you are right.
Yeah.
As opposed to God loves you right where you are, but you're not right.
You got to grow through what you go through. Am I right, Brother Nick?
Preach it, baby. No, but really, like one of the biggest challenges we have is acknowledging that we don't have it together.
Yeah.
And everything is not okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we do need a healer. I mean, we have a crisis of faith right now because we have a crisis of people having a clue that they need a healer.
Yeah. Yeah, I believe that. Yeah. So St. Ignatius talks about and you kind of touched on this, like in desolation, he has like a few rules. And as I remember them at 11:26 a week later from our last episode, he talks about not changing your spiritual practice. So like if you have committed to praying every day,
There's a thing.
yeah. If you've committed to praying every day for 20 minutes and then after a month or a year goes by, suddenly, not because of mortal sin or deep sin, but just because the prayer just starts changing. All of a sudden you're feeling like, you're not feeling close to God. It's not doing anything for you. You're feeling this dryness. He says, do not change your practice. Like remain obedient. Do not change.
We were just talking about things like this today.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been praying the rosary for like the last 4 days solid. Sorry, speaking in the microphone. And I feel like desolation mixed with spiritual attack. And I'm like, dude, if this is going to happen, I'm just not going to pray because it's not worth it.
Yeah.
But it must be like,
Well,
you just gotta
but
push
that's
through it.
today. Leading up to today, you were experiencing a lot of
Well,
consolation.
yesterday it started to be like the enemy was like noticing, hey, Alina is liking this rosary thing, which is crazy because I hated the rosary. And then I started doing it, and I was like, oh, this is really nice, good spiritual awakening. And then the enemy's like, attack her, seize her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So he says, don't change your spiritual practice.
I like that. That's awesome. There
Yeah,
you go, Lauren.
I think
Lauren, right? Is that the girl that asked the question?
This was Lauren Royal. Thank you,
Yeah,
Lauren.
my heart goes out to you because this is not an easy thing to go through.
And
So-
well, she didn't say she's going through it. She just asked the question.
okay, well, whoever's going
I
through
don't want to
it,
assume anything.
Well,
My heart goes out to you.
the other things I think he says is don't make any big decisions in a time of desolation.
that is so huge.
Yeah, he's like don't make any big life decisions if you're in a time of desolation.
Because
crap.
that's when you
I
feel
like
like you
do
have
that
to.
all the time. That's terrible. Oh.
and then I think another one too is like acknowledging that this is God teaching you something, that there will come an end to it. That like the end will, like there will be a time of consolation, and that there is something that God is trying to form in you and teach you. And
I love that.
And that it's something that he's trying to grow. And then the inverse as well. I think he talks about how in times of consolation, we should store up memories of consolation to help us in times of desolation. So like writing down in a spiritual journal or
Ooh, I love me a good journal.
Yeah, just trying to store up those experiences of consolation to help you later when you do experience desolation.
Yes.
And I forget that a lot. Like I'll just get so caught up in the consolation. Like this was awesome. This was great. We're up on the mountain, and forget that I need to store it up somehow, either
Yeah.
by writing it down or trying to remind myself of it later.
That's a great idea. I have
Yeah.
a whole journal of prayers to God in my moments of like deep despair.
That's really cool.
But I don't have anything listed of like, oh,
Yeah.
here's
I did
the
an interview.
fruition.
I did an interview with Dan Driver, who works for Net Ministries, and I forget what he called it, but he called it some type of inspiration box or something. But he said like making some type of anything that, it's almost like scrapbooking, but like anything that increases, like St. Francis de Sales says, like anything that increases devotion, like a sense of devotion in you, anything that like stirs up this like feeling of awe and wonder about God, or this feeling of like longing for virtue, or he said like capturing those things whenever you come across them and putting them all in one book or one place. So if it's a quote by a saint, if it's a passage of scripture, if it's a song, if it's something.
Make it a Pinterest.
Yeah,
board.
to kind of make this little packaged thing that you can turn to and go, oh man, here's this
It's almost
collection.
like a Lumi box.
For $35 a month, we will send you a curated box of things to increase your faith. You can buy holiness at lumibox.co. No one understands that inside joke.
Well, let me explain. So Edmund and
No,
his
it doesn't
wife.
need to explain this.
Well, it
it's
feels
dead.
super random.
It's gone.
All right.
Lumibox was a thing we tried to do.
Oh, it doesn't happen anymore?
No, we stopped it.
What?
You didn't know that?
No.
Yeah, we stopped shipping Lumiboxes like a year ago.
Wow.
Yeah, we were done with it.
All right. Well, all right. So
Moving on. What's the worst mortal sin you've committed? Just give us a commandment. Which one? Give us a number. The seventh
1
one?
through 10.
Whoa, all of them?
I don't think so.
In one
Killed
night?
someone, Nick?
Or
I
a
don't
weekend?
think so. I'm just. What's that over there?
Killing me softly.
With a song. I killed someone with a song.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
that would
intimate.
probably be me.
Lauren, thank you for what you've done to us.
We'll be back after a message from our sponsors. Squarespace. If you enter
Nope, we
squarespace.com
didn't get paid for that.
/ Nick and Alina.
If you are, for whatever reason, enjoying what's happening here
And wanting to start a website or online business, you can go to Squarespace. Build it beautiful. Squarespace.
I'm gonna have to contact Squarespace.
Squarespace. Build it beautiful. Squarespace.
Oh, dear.
Check out nickandalina.com or patron.nickandalina.com. Support what we're doing. We're talking about what it looks like to live as a Christian. It's not perfect.
nickandalina.com.
Nick and
Do you
Alina.
feel like his ankles shouldn't be exposed?
Yeah, that's a little immodest.
Listen,
Ankles
my
are-
ankles are beautiful.
No, ankles are
They're
a weird
like
part of
too
people's
beautiful.
bodies.
I can't.
Do you
see
feel like my
those.
ankles are leading people to sin?
Yeah.
Well, I feel like when it goes from like desert to forest, I feel like that transition, the gradient of desert to forest is really uncomfortable for a lot of people.
So
It's a
what?
transition that people don't want to see. They don't want to see like, yeah, they don't want to.
Would you prefer it if I shaved my legs, Edmund?
No, please don't.
To have a
You know,
Tried
for
that.
most of my life, I had very little hair. Like I have the hair of a French girl, and so my
They were
arms
rather
here.
hairy.
See,
Wait,
I
but
thought
what?
they were
How
hairy.
old? Like pre-puberty
7.
or
Yeah, 7.
Okay.
So my arms have very little hair, but my legs used to be like this as well. They're still not that hairy, but they used to be just like this. And for most of my life, people.
Wait, are you shaving your arms?
That's what people would ask.
Oh,
No,
I'm
I
asking
don't.
you right now.
No, I don't. I'm French Canadian. It's the
Did
French
you see
Canadian in me.
Nick's arms?
But
Look at
listen,
those things.
Yeah,
I know a guy.
No, I don't shave.
Deacon Joe Malenfant. He's a French Canadian,
And he has this?
He does not have this.
Well, but I have the part of French Canadian that's more girl than guy.
Anyways,
Yeah.
God bless you for listening to this show. I hope that it has edified you spiritually.
Oh, are we wrapping up?
emotionally? Yeah.
Oh.
Are we done?
For
Put
with
in the
this
offer.
episode,
Put in the offer code. It's your show to get 10% off at
Nope.
checkout.
false. But for real, check out nickandalina.com to check out last week's episode and everything else we have going on.
We'll see you next week for
We'll see you
episode 3
next
of
week.
Nick and Alina's Conversations.
God bless you guys.
God bless.